Hey class, welcome back to the Office Hours podcast with yours truly, Prof. JC. And I'm looking forward to what we're going to be doing this week in this class. It's going to be a shorter podcast because I want to make sure that you have time to reflect just on your own journey. That's what these one unit courses are for. Hopefully a lot of time for reflection and time for you to think. I know as busy as you are with your education, your schooling, probably for many of you, you're holding full-time jobs. It is really hard to stop and reflect. And I'll tell you why this is becoming really important for me today is just yesterday, the day before I'm recording this video right here, I spent about 4 hours on my kayak over there in Mission Bay. And I find that is, for me, it's incredibly important. I started doing this in COVID. If you remember, they shut down all the gyms, they shut down all the parks, so you couldn't go and get any kind of exercise in. And so I found the one thing that they didn't shut down was the water. And so I went over to Dick's Sporting Goods and I got my first kayak, and I started kayak. I'd never done it before, but I just got out in the water and found that I really enjoy it. It's obviously good exercise, but it's good to be out there in the sun, the fresh air. And yesterday it was a Sunday, and there were quite a few people actually out on the water. And I always look at the people who were there in September, October, and I say, these are the people like myself who just don't want summer to end, so we keep going. But I found that it was really important for me to get back out there on the water because I haven't been in several weeks. It has been a busy summer, crazy busy summer. And I found that I was just getting off center. And for me, there's something about the sun and the water. You put those two things together and it helps me climb back to center. So I was able to do a lot of reflection. I obviously did some kayaking and did some exercising. I figured out a way to take a nap on my kayak, and so I'll do that. But then I'll also spend some time. I've got a little place that I like to kayak out to, and I'll just sit there and kind of do some self-reflection. I have a little journal I bring with me, and I just write. And yesterday I found out that I was doing a ton of writing. And so I'm saying all this to say this. I know how busy life can be, and I'm sure that life is incredibly busy for you. And so I want to make sure that you have some time in this one unit course where you just get to sit and reflect. So here's what we're going to talk about today, okay? We're obviously in a class where we're talking about this idea of integrity. And as we looked at last week, lots of people tend to have this idea of integrity, that it's a good thing, that to have integrity means that you are ethical, that you value, that you are a person of values, you're a person of morals, you're a good, upstanding, citizen. And sure, that can be an aspect of integrity for you or for somebody else. But what integrity really is, it's based on that word integer, which means, it just simply means to be fully integrated. So it means that you are who you are, right? Your character is who you are, right? So I wrote down that integrity is consistently living according to your character, and your character is who you are. And all of us have that. We've got our personalities, our character that is made up of our personalities and our thoughts and our beliefs and our context, how we were raised, and our values and our principles, all these things that we're going to talk about today. All of that kind of melds together, and it creates what we would call our character. It's how we show up in the world. So it's not necessarily a bad or a good thing. It just is. It's who you are. Okay. And there are some people that I would consider them to be dark people. When I say dark, I mean on the inside. There's an inner darkness to who they are. And for them, living in full integrity is to just be a dark person all the time, right? I think the more dangerous ones are the people who have this inner darkness, but they try to act like on the outside that they have all of this goodness and that they are good and righteous people, and really on the inside it's covering up this darkness, which I think, and I've studied this enough to know that all of us have a little bit of that. All of us have a little bit of something on the inside of us. It's like that closet that we're never going to open up for anybody else. We know about it, those things that we know. But that's just a part of life. That's just human nature, right? But there are some people who are just on the inside, they're dark people, and it's almost like a hole of blackness there, and yet they're trying to live, or they're trying to be good, or they're trying to put on this facade that they're good. That's the dangerous. What's really, and here's what we want to get to, is what's inside completely masks the outside. So if on the outside, and this is how most people show up in the world, this is how I'm sure all of you show up in the world, is you show up with a sense of goodness, a sense of what's right in the world, a sense of justice, a sense of, values, and a set of principles. This is how you show up in the world. What integrity is that matches what's really on the inside. Okay, so that you and I and all of us, we are fully integrated people. That's what integrity is. And so here's what I want to give you a chance to do. Just 3 questions that I want you to answer today. Because as we're talking about this idea of character and how you form your character, again, going back to this definition that I wrote here for integrity, where integrity is consistently, okay? Now, every time and then, every now and then we're going to fall out of that. We're not always going to make the best decisions. In a class that I'm teaching, it's this same class right here, but it's all 3 of the 1 unit classes that are all put together for the daytime MBA students. And we're actually in a class together 3 different weekends. We talked about this idea of this past week on Friday of character and what is character. And one of the students reminded all of us that character is not necessarily a bad or good thing. It's just who you are. And sometimes we act out of character. Sometimes we act out of integrity, right? And sometimes that action, whatever that action is, it deeply impacts us, and the example that person gave was a good person who is out on a Friday night or Saturday night, has a little too much to drink, but they have a full day the next day. And so they don't want to take the Uber home, because then that means they have to come back and get it, or they don't have the money to keep their car in the parking lot, or whatever it is. Right. And so they make the decision that I'm going to drive home, and maybe they get into an accident, or they get pulled over. And next thing you know, they're either in jail, or their license is suspended. And so if I were to look at that person from the outside in, I might say, well, this is a person of bad character. Well, no, it's not. It's a good person who acted outside of character, who acted outside of their integrity. Okay. So again, this definition, integrity is consistently living according to your character. So just to who you are. Now the question might be asked, what determines our character? And 3 things I think determine our character. And this is what we're going to talk about. This is what you're going to write about this week. Number 1, what determines our character are the principles that we live by. The principles that we live by. And by principles, here's what I mean. Principles are never changing, completely unwavering rules for life. So these are the things that you say, no matter whatever happens, right? I will never do this. You have a principle that goes towards this. So for instance, most of us on the call would probably say, at least in principle, that no matter whatever happens, I would never murder somebody, right? That's not something I would do. I can speak for myself to say that's pretty much a strong principle for me. I've been upset with people before. I've been deeply upset. I've been hurt by people before, and just like I'm sure you have. But never once did it ever cross my mind that I'm going to end this person's life. That just doesn't. Right. So that's a principle. Most of us have that kind of a principle, some of the larger ones, right? But it's the deeper principles that really impact the direction that we go, right? If a principle that you have is I'm always going to be honest, I will always tell the truth, then when the tax time comes around and one day you got all these finances coming in and maybe multiple LLCs, and you get business and you get real estate, and there's a temptation somewhere on there to fudge the numbers. Okay. If your principle is I'm a truthful person, then you don't fudge the numbers. You live according to that principle. Okay. Even if you want to, even if you could and you could get away with it, you still say, I don't do it because that's my principle. If your principle is I'm not a person who cheats, then maybe at some point you're in a relationship and you're married or something, and you're your marriage isn't going the way it needs to be, your partnership, your relationship, whatever it is, someone else comes along, but you say, I'm not a person who does this, then no matter how tempting that situation is, you don't step out. Okay. Maybe you have a principle that says that I am consistently consistent. Okay. That means that you show up every time. And that means when you're exhausted and you're tired and you don't want to show up for the meeting, you don't want to show up for whatever it is, one of your principles is you say, I am consistently consistent. So that means no matter how tired or exhausted I am, unless I'm sick or something like that, I show up for this meeting. I show up for the people who have depended on me. Okay. So the first question that I want you to think about, and I really want you to think about this, don't just throw out something, right? Don't just go online and say, find me principles. I want you to think about 5 different principles that you live. Okay. And these are deep-seated principles that you have, and maybe you don't know what they are yet. Maybe you're trying to figure that out. But so I want you to write 5 that you have, and if you don't have 5, I want you to think about 5. And these are rules that no matter what happens, this does not change. Okay, this is a principle that I live by. No matter what happens around me, it does not change. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2 are values, right? If we want to know how our character is determined, it's determined by our values. Now here's what values are. And I think a lot of people get this wrong as well. Values are behaviors that we desire to see consistently in our life. Okay. So principles are rules that we want to see consistently. Values are behaviors. Okay. So a lot of companies, you walk in and they'll list their values, their company values. And I think some of them, especially nowadays, we're starting to see some that are getting a little bit better. They're actually naming, here are the actions that we want to see. But when they're listing out values, what they're saying are, these are the behaviors that we want to see. If I want to know what someone's values are, if I want to know what your values are, I just can follow you around for a day and watch how you behave. I will know what your value. You don't have to say anything to me. I'll know what your values. And the same goes for me. If you wanted to know what are JC's values, you just follow me around for a day and you would figure out, here's what his values are based on his behavior. Okay. A lot of times people mix that up and they say, well, here's what we value. And they think that's what values are. And it's intermixed a little bit. But values are the behaviors. And when you say, here are our family values, okay, what I'm saying is, here are the behaviors that we accept in this family, which means that here are the behaviors that we do not accept in this family. Here are our team values, our organizational values. So the second question is, what are your personal values that you hold to? 5. I want you to list 5 personal values that you have. Okay. All you have to do is list them out. Okay. And then here's the third question that I want you to consider. And I want you to be honest with this. Okay. This is kind of a 2-part question. How consistent are you with your principles and your values? That's part 1. And part 2 is there a certain principle or value that you would look at and you would say, I need a little bit more work on this right here. Okay. So for instance, I'll be transparent with you and I'll say this, in my principles, and I actually have them stated, they're actually listed, and I didn't bring them with me. I was going to kind of show you, I have my own constitution, and we're going to kind of work to get there ourselves on this, or at least part way through it. When you take your purpose class, if you take it with me, then we'll work on the other aspect of your constitution. But it starts with our principles and our values. But for instance, I have a principle that says that I'm a healthy person, that I do healthy things and I eat healthy. But let me tell you 2 things that I wrestle with in my own life. And I'm just being transparent with you. One is I wrestle with, I love carbs and I love sweets. I mean, it's insane how much I love good bread, donuts, brownies, right? I have to run from that kind of stuff. Okay. And usually I do, especially if I'm in public, but it's in the privacy of my home, right, where I wrestle with that. I also say that health is very important to me, which means that I need to get the rest that I need. And I'm wrestling in my own life. And it's actually something that I am working on. It sounds like something small to you, but it's actually pretty major to me. I struggle with going to bed on time. It's something I wrestle with. Just last night, my wife is in there. Hey, it's time to go to bed. It's time to go. And she's learned not to fight me on this. And Sometimes I've told her, fight me more on this. And I'm still plugging away. It's like 11:30 at night. And I really should be going to bed between 9:30 and 10. You're really in bed by 9:30, lights out by 10. That's the rule that we have. But I will consistently push that boundary, which then creates the next day and the next day and the next day. I'm getting old enough where I can't pull all-nighters, right? But I'm struggling. I'm not in the mindset I should be. So I'm not showing up the way that I want to. Okay. And so these are areas that I wrestle with. Okay. And so I want you to be just as transparent and say, okay, well, what are some of the principles and values that maybe you're not quite seeing? Okay. Now, I do think that our principles and values can be, they can be aspirational. It's not that you're saying, well, these are my current principles and you have them. But if you don't have a set of stated principles, then I would make them aspirational and say, here's the person I want to be. Here are the principles that I want to have. Here are the values I want to have. Make them aspirational. Okay. That's all I got for you today. I look forward to reading your responses. Thanks so much for your work on this. And I hope that this provides you a little time to reflect and to really think about this, because this is important. Again, as we read last week, you can have all the things, you can be as competent as you want to be. You can have all the relationships you want, but if you don't have solid character, which is formed through your principles and your values, everything else is, I promise you, at some point it's all going to blow up, or you're not going to be able to sustain the success that you want in life and in business. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you in the next episode. Reach out if you need me. Take care.